video. All right. And here we are. So it's my pleasure and it's an absolute honor to have Julia Kirst, author, with us today as our guest. She has written a book. She has done what many of us maybe dream to do one day, right? And this book is focused on US culture, since Julia moved to the US and lived there for 30 years and observed many features about US culture in a very detailed way. I have the book right here. It's a nice read, a very nice read, even if, you know, even if US isn't your, particular interest area, it's a very well-written book. It's one of those books that you can pick up and read from cover to cover. I have to be honest, this is what I did when I got my copy. And I was intrigued by how everything was set up in a very practical way. So, it has a little bit of theory, but it takes you down that path only for a short time. And then it goes into practical applications, which is something that I think many of us struggle to do, but Julia has done it beautifully. So Julia is a cultural anthropologist, Harvard graduate, author, cross-cultural trainer, I think business owner as well, if I'm not mistaken, probably many things. And we're honored to have you. Questions are welcome during the session. We just ask you to, maybe wait for a pause or, wait for a break in the session, and we'll address the questions. You can also put your question into the chat window. All right. And we'll be happy to address it. And we'll also leave a little block of time at the end for, just question and answers. All right. But if you have a burning question at a certain specific moment, and you don't want to forget your question, we can address it in that moment also. And if you want to get in touch with Julia, here's all her contact info. I hope I got all the sites, Julia. So your website with your name, your LinkedIn, and What the US Wants, which is the title of the book. All right. So thank you and welcome, Julia. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much. I cannot tell you how exciting it is to be with fellow interculturalists. This work that we do, I don't know about you, but for me, it feels like a very lonely job sometimes. It's just you and clients and you with other groups. So to meet you all, to find you all, and then to have an hour of your time is also such a privilege. So I'm very grateful for that.
And it's great to have you. So great.
So Cheryl, go ahead.
Yeah, you go ahead.
A question that you've asked me before, and maybe that's exactly where you were going, but I didn't really think of myself as an interculturalist until very recently.
Really? Okay.
Until I sort of discovered online. I discovered on LinkedIn, actually. I joined an event with Michael Gates, and that's when I discovered that there were a lot of other people doing what I do. In my little world, which is more of the academic world, I was a cultural anthropologist who had decided that academia was too, up in the head, and that I wanted to apply things. And so I was just an odd kind of anthropologist. And then I discovered, no, you're just an interculturalist. So this joining this community is very recent for me. And I'm so excited it exists. This work that I do is not really welcome in anthropology and academic anthropology, right? We like to study others, other capital O. And I have always said, including during my doctorate, I said, my natives, my others are the Americans. I'm going to study what they think, what they say, what they believe, what they value. And then my job is to explain that to people from other countries who are coming to the US and need to respond. And that's how I have adapted from the academic setting to becoming an interculturalist.
This is fascinating. And I think it sheds light on the journey for many of us, in the sense that it's such a niche field that we don't often know that there are others out there doing it. I mean, I also didn't really know that until recently myself. And so I'm glad that you fell into this, in this community, and also that you met Michael Gates, and that opened up a kind of gateway. Good. All right. So why don't you start by telling us about yourself and how you got into this field in the first place?
So Cheryl sent me some questions right ahead of time, and I discovered I was fascinated by the questions and understood a little bit more as I was thinking about my answers, that I came into this field. I think I didn't know I was going to do this professionally, but the questions of culture and belonging and what is normal, natural for one group and is not for another, those questions I think were there for me very early on. I'll try to make this a brief story, but I was actually born in Germany, okay, but raised in Brazil. We're from Brazil, but my dad was doing a PhD in Germany. I was born there. My mom had the German passport as well. This was 1967. So when I was born, for Germans, I was Brazilian because my father's passport was from Brazil. For Brazilians, I was German because I had been born on German soil. So technically, I had no citizenship until I was 18. And I think that's, today when I look back, I think that's where this where am I from question, I think it begins there at birth. I ended up growing up in Brazil, had 2 kids in Brazil, and then spent my adult life raising them in the US. I was married to somebody from the US, and that's how half my life and my second half of life, let's say, has been in the US, and my first half of life in Brazil. And I think it's natural, as it probably is to so many of you in this call, that we are continually encountering situations where we discover that what's normal in one place is not in the other. Right. And so we
true.
we grow in awareness. I always say that the work that I do, it's not that other people couldn't figure this out for themselves, but it would take them years in a new country, and it would take them a special sensibility to culture. And I think in this call, most of us, for some reason or another, have that kind of sensibility, and we can pass that on to other people.
Totally. So yeah, I think it's these experiences that lead us to want to help others to understand the layers and the nuances of culture and adjust in the way that, we had to, and maybe help them to do it better or have less trauma in that whole experience. Now, you mentioned a little earlier about trying to translate your academic experience into practical applications. And we also spoke yesterday about how that wasn't so welcome at Harvard. So why don't you tell us now a little bit about your academic journey?
Yeah. So actually, my bachelor's is in theater. That's how I started. And then I was teaching theater in high school, started thinking more about education. And my master's is actually from the Harvard Graduate School of Education, where I studied psychology and human development. And it was working with so-called youth at risk that I became interested in this concept of at risk. Who decides? Who puts who creates the label and defines who is inside the box of being at risk, right? And that's when I started thinking more about culture, because the people who were defining these labels had a set of beliefs, of upbringing, of values that was different than the values of the kids we were applying these to. And that's how I became officially interested in culture. I think to some degree I was always interested since childhood, but it was in the moment when I was working at the juvenile drug court that I noticed that all the service providers were white, middle class women like me with, we need to help you become part of a productive society. We need to get you into university. We need to get you jobs. We need to make sure you don't get pregnant. It's like, who established these values and how might they be different for these people that we're trying to help? So I started thinking about culture, and that's how I went on for a PhD in anthropology. And that was at Brandeis University, which is also in the Boston area. I was telling Cheryl that I did go to the Harvard anthropology department when I started feeling an interest in researching more about this. And I was told what you do is too applied. And now I completely makes sense. If what we do is very applied. A book like this, I will not get an academic position with a book like this, but I will get many more readers who will be able to use it. I was not interested in writing an article that would be read by 10 people and then I could put it on my CV and get tenure. That was not my goal. I really believe that the way this thinking about culture is something that should be taught in kindergarten. It should certainly be taught in high school. Yeah, we need these skills to interact in a global world, and we're not doing enough. So we have a much bigger role in the world, I think, than most people realize, where we need more space to do this work. Right.
Great. So I'm so impressed, like I said, of the practicality of this book and how it's very clearly defined and it's connected to values. All the different behaviors are backed up by research. So it is research based, but yes, at the same time, it does a lot to help people who dream to go to the US to understand the American mentality and how that translates into behavior, how they should behave. So why don't you tell us about how you got the idea for the book? How did you get the idea for this particular topic?
See, I worked with international students for many years, and actually in a boarding school also, and then colleges and universities. And there were common themes, common questions about the culture, right? And I like to use this one example of a Chinese student coming to campus, meeting his roommate, and then the class was called American Ways, which I always had difficulty with. But he comes to office hours and says, my roommate is clearly male. Why is he asking me to use they pronouns? Right? So to explain that's not necessarily an individual wish of this roommate. There is a history behind this request. There is a culture, there are values that are gender norms changing over time. And all of that is reflected in that question, in this very simple question that this young man is trying to understand. And our role then is to explain this so that he can engage with this roommate, with the college community, with knowledge, with understanding, and especially with respect. Right? And when we don't do that kind of bridging, we end up enforcing these little groups where it happens in every university, right? That you have these little enclaves where people support each other when they're from the same country, often because there's no support to interact with the larger culture or the hegemonic culture of campus, right? So I saw these struggles with my students and I started to notice themes. And the book idea came when I wanted to teach about this, but I couldn't find a book that explained this material. You will see that I explain the United States, but I don't admire it. Yeah, I've had people say, "Oh, you should take this to the embassy," and no, they'll take my passport away, right? Because it's informative, but I don't buy into the American dream, right? And I give you information, and then you can decide whether or not you believe that this is the land of the free and of the opportunities and all that.
Right. So it's neutral on that front.
I think it's neutral on that front. Yes, it actually is very interesting. If I can give an example, there's a section the chapter on individualism, where I talk about the concept of self-care, right? I had not, actually, I'm in Brazil right now. I don't hear people talking about self-care. This idea that you have to remove yourself from the noise and maybe you take a bath and a candle and music and blah, blah. It's all this alone time right? And where I am now, the last thing you want to do if you're not feeling well is be alone. Right. So I explained that the concept of self-care is about soothing the individual. And my daughter, who was raised, I have two daughters, but one of them she was 3 months old when we moved to the US, so basically completely American. And she says, if that part about self-care, I did not understand. What's your problem with self-care? That is the norm for her. Right. But we can start looking at these cultural practices from the perspective of culture and then show it back even to Americans. So it can be rich for the outsider, but also for Americans to look at their own culture from a different perspective, or from an outsider's perspective. Right. So the book comes out of all these scenes, these moments, these experiences. And then understanding that there were a lot of people new to the country who were just kind of like, what is going on here? So let me show you a little bit about what I see, and maybe it can be useful to you.
Very good. So what do you think is the USP of the book? I mean, it is unique, and what makes it absolutely essential for anyone who's dreaming to break into the US market, whether with a job or by studying?
Yeah. So maybe we should just clarify that I see the outside the US who are coming to study. Maybe I am working with somebody now whose husband came to study. He is at university. She was looking for a job. So where do you begin to do that? Most people will not know, international applicants will not know there's something called the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and that it's a good idea to take a look and see what the market looks like. So universities, jobs, and then I also work with a lot of people who are applying for visas, the National Interest Waiver Visa, the EB-2, which is a visa in which it's a waiver because you don't have to have a job offer. You can enter the country simply because you have a set of skills that are needed in the country and that the country is unable to fill quickly enough. For example, dentists, right? So I work with a lot of Brazilian dentists who were coming to the US to revalidate their degree. There are too many dentists in the US. There are not enough, at least in many parts of the United States. So I'm sorry, I got lost here. Saying just so these three groups is how I see this book being useful for.
The biggest application. Yeah. So you were just saying that it was students, people that want to work there, and then maybe people with a certain skill set that don't have a job offer yet, but
yes. You were asking about the unique
USP. Yes.
Yeah. So people who are in these situations, you can get a book on how to write a resume, for example. You can get a book on how to write, or online articles, how to write a statement of purpose.
True.
But what I don't see is is material that explains why things should be a certain way. What's the cultural foundation of that? Why should a resume in the United States be 1 or 2 pages long, 2 at most, and not the 16 pages that are common for somebody with 20 years of experience in Brazil, right? What people do often is just they simply translate the document because they think language is all that matters, right? Well, that American officials say picks up those 16 pages, forget it.
Right.
And you've just lost your chances because you didn't understand how Americans think about time, how much Americans will actually give you. I always say, if you may sit down with somebody and have a wonderful conversation, at the end, you're going to thank them mostly for their time.
Right.
More than for their insight. Why? Because that is so central to the culture, making sure we don't waste it, we don't lose it.
Right.
So there's a whole chapter in the book that is about the concept of time. And if you don't know what that means, it's going to be hard for you to respond properly when you're trying to get somebody to understand you.
That is so true. I mean, the way we behave is linked, it is rooted in some fundamental values. And time factors, for example, you're absolutely right. If you waste an American's time, it's almost like sacrilege. They're going to be angry at you. And and they need to know why. It's not enough. It's true that people don't learn enough. It's superficial to just tell them that this is how you have to behave. But if you tell them why and where it comes from and the whole historical background that evolved that value into what it is now, people will connect with it much better, and they will believe it. You also mentioned another thing about language, and you had a story about how it's important not to just translate.
That also happens all the time. So I've been doing this work for about 4 years now, 20 full time. Before that, doing it in institutions, but on my own for about 4 years. And it just recently occurred to me that the best way to explain what we do, or what I do at least, is to think of language skills, which we always think, oh, that's the most important thing. Once I pass TOEFL, once I have a good grade in my TOEFL, all the doors are going to open, right? Language skills are really just the ingredients for a fine meal. Right? If you it doesn't matter how wonderful these ingredients are, how high end they are. If you don't know how to put them together, if you dabble with your recipe, if you dabble around the kitchen with those ingredients, you're not going to make anything that is very impressive. Right?
That's right.
So I say that the work that we do as interculturalists is show people how to use those ingredients. I call the work that I do the recipe. Right? You bring the skills, and now I'm going to show you how to use it in order to achieve a certain goal. But the first challenge, I think, for us is to convince people of the importance of that recipe, right? Because if you look around, there are English schools everywhere.
Oh,
right.
Yes.
And this just gives us the sense that that's all you need. Once you pass a certain level, you're good to go. And without the cultural sensibility, you talked about time earlier. What I explain to people is that respecting somebody's time is the same in the United States as respecting them as a person. So it goes so beyond time. And
That's
somebody
really
needs to
true.
explain that to you. Otherwise, you're going to offend without having meant to, and you're going to end the opportunities that could have come from a good relationship.
Exactly. I mean, you'll not only lose out on that relationship, but you'll lose out for yourself in many cases. Like I had a story from one of my Saudi students that showed up late for a presentation and he got a 0. Like he was a really smart guy, and he said, what do you mean? What do you mean, teacher? I prepared. I did everything. I'm ready. And he said, sorry, you're late. You missed your slot. 0. And so this is how it can also hurt the person if they don't understand this value. Good. So then how can we as cross-cultural trainers utilize your book in the best way?
So I see 2 ways. Of course, some of you may be working with people going to the United States. And in that sense, I'd say it's best to pick up the book and see if you can find ways that are valuable for you. I should actually talk a little bit about the structure of the book first. The first 2/3 are the 7 values, right? So here's the book. The first chapter is why values matter. I call them values. Other people might call them culture. I talk about, a lot of the people who read this have never given any thought to culture, right? So the first thing we need to do is just to explain this concept that it's all around us. We just don't notice it, right? So there's the analogy of the fish swimming and saying, what water? What do you mean? Right. So that's the first shock for a lot of people I work with. Like, what do you mean? These are not necessarily, my actions are not necessarily my free will. There's influence from my culture here. That can come as a surprise, first of all, right? So the first chapter is called Why Values Matter, so we can talk about this. And then the values are, then there's 7 other values: success, progress, time, productivity, evidence, individualism, and personal branding. So these are the first, this is the first 2/3 of the book. And then the second part is about application materials. We talk about the importance of knowing your audience, what that means for your resume, cover letters, recommendation letters, and interviews, and finally the elevator pitch. So back to what you were asking about, how is this book different? I think you might find a whole book that tells you about resumes, cover letters, but it doesn't tell you, for example, that in your resume, you need to shape the information so that it shows you as somebody who has progressed.
Yes,
over their
this is
career.
really true. Yes.
Right? So this is where the first part of the book and the second talk to each other.
Okay.
Right? Sometimes people will ask me, well, if I'm asked, how about a challenging time in your life, what did you do? Say, you had the challenge, that's human, but you overcame it. Americans like stories of overcoming obstacles.
That's
and
right.
Never losing sight of your goal.
That's right.
So I had it. So when I do a lot of listening to people, and then story. So there's this young man who started dental school and then suffered an accident, a terrible accident. His memory was affected, and the doctor said, you're going to have to quit dental school, right? You won't be able to handle that. So he goes into tourism. And after 2 years studying tourism, he says, no, I'm going back to dentistry. That is my calling. So that creates a wonderful story of persistence, of somebody who has a goal, is not afraid of overcoming obstacles to get to that goal. Those kinds of stories are really cherished by American culture.
That's true. Right? That's very true. It's
so
really,
most people cannot find that story. They don't realize that they have a gem in their hands. And I help them find that gem and then express it in a way that can be understood by an American reader.
That's great, because everybody has a gem. Everybody has had a challenge. Everybody has had a triumph, and everybody has a gem to share. And it's all about how you present it. And I guess that's also where the personal branding part comes in, which, I mean, I love that chapter, because it is so true about American culture that personal branding is really important. Like, you have to be an individual and stand out in very unique ways and prove it that you are worthy of whatever job or whatever visa you're applying for. Excellent. So then, if you don't mind, let's segue into another topic about the book itself.
Let me
go ahead.
Just add something. If I can add something about the self-branding.
Sure.
That is so difficult for some people, especially. So I'm being originally from Brazil. I also deal with a lot of very successful Brazilian women in particular, and they are excusing themselves for all that they did not do. And so we gotta cut that out, because that's not self-branding. Yeah. And then the idea that you have to promote yourself is very hard for them to accept, because you're not supposed to do that. It's not polite for women, especially still in this day and age, right? And so what I need to say then is, well, you may be afraid of doing that, but the people are competing for the same position. They're doing that.
Right. So you have to go with the wave and go with the flow of things and try to be in that wave. And actually, you're right. Also, I think for collectivist cultures, they might have a hard time. Cultures that are typically, they don't toot their own horns about their accomplishment. They're taught to, be in line with everybody else. Like, there's that saying in Japanese language, the nail that sticks out will be hammered down. So they're used to being being like everybody else, not standing out, not gaining attention for yourself. And so I guess for them, it might be also difficult.
In family, if it has happened over and over again, where you ask somebody from a country like Brazil, tell us little bit about yourself, and they'll tell you about their family, about their children. And as we're practicing for interviews, I have to cut them off and say, I'm sorry, I understand that this is really important to you. Letters of recommendation. Oh, he's my best friend. We have our, Sundays together. So don't talk about this, because it's going to look like they're writing this because you are their friend. And what the American wants is you individual, no family, no friends. You fought, you made your way all alone.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying I approve of that, but I'm saying that people from outside the US who want something in the US need to know that this is valued.
Right. It's really true. It's really true. Everything. I mean, like I said, you identified these values, connected them to the history and how they evolved, and then how people can apply them in their applications, in their interviews, in their cover letters, in how they relate to people. So good. Now about the book itself, since maybe some of us here are dreaming one day to write a cross-cultural book.
Yeah.
Would you like to tell us about how you actually wrote it? What was your process like? Did you have, a certain time of the day, and how often, and how did you organize it seems like an insurmountable task, like writing hundreds and hundreds of pages of material. I mean, how did you tie it all together and get the book done?
The writing is actually not the hardest part, right?
It's about the discipline.
For me, for me, that wasn't the hard. For me, it was the logistics of figuring out, how do you get this on paper? How do you get this to libraries? But in terms of the writing process, the most important part was the consistency for me. I think a lot of people might begin and then it just fizzles out after a few weeks, a few months, and to stick to it. For me, it was an outlet for my creativity, especially during winter. There were two things happening, and this was October 2020. I am a rower, and so in October, rowing season ends, and you basically are on the erg, which I don't enjoy, until May, when the lakes are defrosted again. So I had a new space in my life when rowing season ended, and it was also the pandemic, which meant I had more alone time than before. And so at the beginning, it just really felt like I was just this was my way of getting up in the morning and having something I enjoyed to do. So I wrote an hour a day for about a year, weekdays. This is not a new idea. There's a book called Atomic Habits, right? That whatever you do little by little, you can get really far. I think I had the discipline, but I also had the benefit of having written a dissertation before that.
Okay.
Right? So like everybody else, I wanted to give up the dissertation close to the end. That's the normal experience, right? And I stuck through it, and I experienced the benefits of sticking through it. And I think that was also an incentive to then keep going until the book was done.
So
Atomic Habits.
That's a fantastic story, and it seems not so difficult when you say, oh, it's just an hour a day. I mean, I think we can all find an hour a day to do something we love and we really feel passionate about and committed to. And you also told me some nice story about collecting all of the different topic areas into chapters. Would you like to share that with the audience?
Yeah. I'm a very tactile person. In fact, and now I'm in an Airbnb, and I really miss my big board. Right. So I had a sticky wall, and then I had the Post-it notes. And I just, as things would happen, for example, I think it's the chapter about self-branding that begins with the story a headline that I saw in the paper, somebody who had just died, and it said, Lucille was anything but average.
That
Right?
sounds very
So,
American.
yes. So to your last minute, you're still
Right.
being checked for if you're average or not, right? Or I walked by a store and it literally, the sign says, we're closed, but still awesome. I take a picture, I come back home, and I put it on the sticky notes, so
Right.
as just as a collection of events that remind me of certain values, which then as they started grouping them together, and that's how those 7 chapters came to be.
Okay. I think this is, I can actually picture you with this wall with all these colorful Post-its, and I can see how it can help. I mean, we maybe wouldn't think to collect topics for a book that way, but it actually really works. I mean, because our brains are wired like that, like to be distracted really easily. And I know that I have Post-its everywhere, stuck here and there. You can see my Post-its here and there. But if I actually came up with a system like that, where I stuck them on the wall, and then I could see that it's like a visual thing and a tactile thing. As you said, you're a tactile person, and then just reorganize and group them together. So it's a really
and then
good
start
method.
writing
Start writing
a paragraph about a
each
story, and
one.
then see how they work together.
True. Good. All right. And so what about the actual publishing process? Because that seems like another mountain to climb.
Yeah. I think that, so for me, that was the bigger mountain to climb, simply because so I decided early on, these days you have really many paths to go, right? To choose. You can go traditional path, being an independent author. And as I started researching, I realized there were so many resources to be an independent researcher, to do the researcher, an independent author, to do the whole process by yourself. Because you can easily hire somebody to do the cover, to do the editing, the proofreading. I had to put some money into it that I have not seen back, and that's normal, I think. But even just a few years ago, I don't think you had the amount of choices you have today. So for instance, if I go into a website called Reedsy, and I say I want a cover designer, you have a whole collection of people coming up. You can ask for 5 different proposals, and that's how I found the cover designer that I worked with. The editor was not so great. She did the first round, but then I had other people look at it. I got a lot of information from the Alliance for Independent Authors.
Okay.
So I bought I think they call it the associate membership, is before you actually published. And also any question you have, you put out there, and you're going to get quality responses. It's a new world out there. So, and it's so beneficial, not just because you keep more of the profits,
right.
But for me, it was important to have independence over the process, over the title of the book, I did not want a Statue of Liberty in the cover of the book. I knew that, and I also knew that it was a niche market. It was going to be easier for me to find the people who needed to read this book than it would be for any publisher.
That's really true.
So for me, it made sense. Not for everybody, but it's very possible these days. There's a woman called Joanna Penn. Her website is thecreativepenn.org, I think. Also, tons of resources. Also a resource for finding cover designers. So it's really a much easier way to do things today, I think, than it was just 5 years ago.
Okay. So self-publishing is also somehow very American, isn't it?
I discovered this when I got here. Yeah, I got to Brazil right when the annual book fair was happening, and I went to the booth of independent authors, and they said, "This sucks. We're not very respected here," and it's not true anymore. It's not true in the States. Yes. So I don't know how this is in different countries.
There's also things like print on demand nowadays. you know, where you can
Yes.
have a book script and you can have all the designs and everything in place, and then when people
Yeah.
order, they print them and send them off. It's incredible the amount of options that are there. So
Yes,
so
you
yeah,
don't have to have I mean, you can go to a printer and get a box of 50, 100, 500, but you don't have to anymore. You don't have to
right,
have that collection, those boxes in your garage.
right,
And then
right,
you send, and they'll send it to whoever orders it. Yeah.
right.
So
Excellent.
that waiting for somebody to like your book is no longer an excuse to not have a book published. You can definitely do this on your own.
It's good to have that. I mean, I think we all feel inspired by this positivity and, this encouragement for any of us out there who are thinking about writing a book, and you've done it. So you're proof of that. All right. So then I think we're just coming up to about 13 minutes left. We can open up the floor to questions now. So anyone, if you have a question,
Bye, Daniela.
Bye, Daniela. Feel free to unmute yourself and, just go ahead and tell us your question. I'll check the comments. Okay, she was talking about dynamic, okay, atomic habits. Good. So I'm sure we have questions. Don't be shy. Come on. Feel free. This is your chance to talk to a real author who's in our field, right? Who's written a book about maybe something that's also close to our hearts, even if, we're working with other different cultures, and, she's in the American culture, but, maybe we have an idea of writing a book like this one day, or maybe we're thinking that we'd like to write a book, but we don't know what to write about yet. So does anyone want to, ask maybe about guidance in terms of figuring out which direction you want to go with your book, for example? Is there anyone out there who has a sort of inkling of an idea, but not sure where to take it? Maybe Julia could give us some guidance on that. Come on, I see some wheels turning, some thoughts going over there. So,
or just the question could also just be, what made you interested in this conversation at all?
yes. Why did you sign up for this? Yeah, that's a good way to.
And I can give a piece of advice if anybody, maybe not here, but maybe somebody listens to this later. I think writing a regular newsletter to your clientele is a great exercise in creating that routine. Maybe it's not every day, maybe, but just once a week. And you start collecting content that you often didn't even know you had in your mind.
This is really true. This is really true about collecting content. If you kind of gently push yourself to write the content, then you realize how much you actually have in your head, how much that you have to say, but without some extra little push. I mean, I know I've experienced this, not with newsletters, because I'm very undisciplined about sending newsletters. I want to send newsletters, but I just don't. I send them every few months. But with writing posts for LinkedIn, because I push myself and I say, I want to post on LinkedIn. Well, then what happens is it pushes you to like research different things and actually sit and write. And although it's little pieces, each post could be expanded into an article, and each article could be expanded into a chapter.
Right.
So I think this is really good advice, that you start small and you start from somewhere. And then by putting all the pieces together, like again, back to the Atomic Habits book and those concepts, doing something regularly in tiny pieces adds up to a lot over time. So questions,
sometimes
anyone?
The biggest part is the confidence. It adds to a lot, and it gives you confidence that you have something to say. I think that's a big part.
Yes. And I think finding your voice takes time too. Like, I mean, I remember when I started this whole personal branding thing, it was just 2 years ago. Exactly 2 years, maybe a little more than 2 years ago, when I quit my job in Saudi Arabia and started this whole business I have now. I was terrified to write on LinkedIn. I don't know why. I mean, to write my own thoughts. Okay. I was grappling at, where to get content ideas and how to write, what to write. And, it takes time, but you can get over that, because I somehow got over it. And I used to have this massive fear about having any of my written content out in the public, like out in the internet.
Yeah.
And then you start little by little, and then you realize what works and what doesn't work, because you realize who likes which posts, like which posts get more attention and what people start commenting. And then you realize, oh, this is a good topic. Maybe I should write more about it. And then you turn it into an article, and then you turn it into a YouTube video. But it's true, you really have to start from somewhere and just push yourself and say, yes, I can do it. I have a voice, I have opinions, and everybody has an opinion. Like we were saying earlier, everybody has a gem. Everybody has an opinion that can be expressed, that others will gravitate towards. Okay, as it's true for everyone, not everyone will gravitate towards your topic, but it doesn't matter, because it's about finding your niche, right? It's about finding your tribe and your group that resonates with what you say, isn't it? I mean, it's not about pleasing everyone. We can never please everyone. That's impossible. So and sometimes people will make nasty comments on your posts, but this is just part of it. And it, this is how we learn, and this is how we realize which direction we should go in, and all of that. So anyway, I'm waiting for someone to raise their hand and ask a question. Yada! Oh, I got two hands at once. Okay.
Well, first of all, thanks a lot for this contribution. Out of curiosity, so first of all, I'd like to know from a practical point of view, how you have been promoting your book. Which channels you've been using, if you're still using them, I don't know. And then if you've noticed, if this book has had, I'm sure it has, but if you have any specific story that you may want to share about the impact that it has had on anyone who's ready to, you were talking about, translating your academic expertise into actual interculturalism, is applied in the real world. And so
great questions, Chiara. Great question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let me just it froze just a little bit. Was the first question about social media channels?
Not necessarily.
Oh, how I was promoting the book?
How promoted it, or yes, which channels?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's a lot.
So I'm still learning how to do that, right? So for example, I was so excited about this because I had somebody buy the book in Ethiopia and somebody buy the book for the San Jose Library, San Jose, California Public Library. And they got it through something to a distributor called Smashwords. And Smashwords will have it available. But that doesn't mean that I don't have to go after it and have, people actually know it's there. So I am setting up talks with groups. It's a very lengthy process. It's really, like I said, most people don't understand that they need this. They know that they need English classes, but they don't know that they need the cultural piece, right? So a lot of it is just educating people. So one way I'm doing this, I just finished editing a video with somebody who I actually didn't know that she had read the book until she wrote a review on Amazon. And I recognized the name as that. Did you? So she's a Brazilian. She had lived in the US before, went to college in the US, but was applying for jobs and was just looking up questions online and deciding what to answer. And she said she was doing okay, but she wasn't really getting the opportunities that she wanted. And I had worked with her on her resume, and I said, you have to read the book. You have to get more informed about culture and what the expectations are. And she said, she read the book. She said, in one sitting, and then went to another interview and got a higher position than the one she was applying to. Because she said, I knew exactly how to tell my story. So when those things happen, it's like, wow. So
Great story.
the way I'm using that now. So we had an interview, I just edited, and then that's going to be on my website, maybe on YouTube, but it's very slow work. Yeah. To show the impact. Yeah.
Well, one good thing is that you can put a self-published book on Amazon, right? It doesn't have to be.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
that's one good place to market it. I mean,
Oh,
they have their own marketing, they have their own algorithms, and if people search, I mean, I suppose
Yeah.
that's a whole
And so
other
you
ball
just-
game.
The whole other part that I had to learn was what keywords you use to describe your work, right? So that they are found when you have I just SEO also, right? Learning about search engine optimization with your website. I have a book website, but I know there's much more I could do with search engine optimization. So it's so many hats that we wear when we are entrepreneurs.
Right. And it's a process, and we have to be patient with
Yeah.
ourselves and know that, you know, the right time will come. And as you said, doing little pieces every day add up to a lot. And it's also connected to your work. It's connected to your day-to-day training that you're doing and speaking and things. So I think that also helps.
I'll say my dream, I would like to see international students all around the US getting a hold of this book and have this book be used in their, freshman English specific for international students. I would, that is the audience I would like. It's the students I used to work with, but now I'd like to come from the other side and just, let's replace that book that just is just one big propaganda about the American dream, and let's give you real tools. Yeah.
Right.
So I'm not there yet, but I'm hoping.
Best of luck. You're on the right track. You're doing great. And it's only come out. When did it come out? Not even a year ago, right?
Late May.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So did we get all the questions, Chiara? I think, did we get them? Yes. All right.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much. And,
all right.
Thank you. And Harriet had a question.
Yeah, I have two actually, if that's okay. I was just curious to know. Well, thank you also for your time. No, but thank you for your insightful interview or webinars. It was very interesting. I wanted to ask you, do you have a favorite chapter or section that you really enjoyed writing about? And secondly, based on the feedback that you have received from people who have read it, the reviews, what section then resonated, do you think, the most with the readers?
Good questions. Yeah. Whew, the one that I am, of course, the why values matter, because I am an anthropology educator at heart. I had to really work hard to stay away from the jargon. I explain what ethnocentrism means. I explain what a gatekeeper is, deep culture. And so I really had to hold back a little bit here, because I'll just read you one line here that I just said. The underlying sentiment about deep culture is that these dispositions, values, attitudes, and beliefs are the norm. They are attitudes that anybody in their right mind would and should have. So that's a little bit heady. And so that's definitely my favorite chapter. I think what people have most resonated with is chapter 9, which is called Your Audience. Okay, this is really new for a lot of people, that if you're preparing anything, you need to know your audience really well. Yeah, I have people come and say, "Oh, Julia, I think I'm going to be called for an interview. Can you prepare me?" I say, "Let's wait until you know what program it is, because this is like going on a date, and you want to know everything." Yeah, well, not blind. So it would be blind if you were just preparing randomly, right? But I
Right.
say you need to know what the program is, and then dig deep. Stalk them on social media and find out what this program values. And then you're going to
Absolutely.
show how you are the perfect match for what they need.
That
Right?
is so true.
That is new for a lot of people, right? For a lot
Right.
of people, it's just like, look at all that I have done. And I say, let's move from me to we. And because most people don't do this, when you do the we, you stand out. Yeah, you stand out and you have better chances of getting the opportunity.
That is really
Yeah.
true. Good point.
Yeah.
Good lesson for us.
Yeah.
All
So,
right.
great.
Anyone
Thank
else?
you for
Thank
the
you,
great
Harriet. Those were
questions.
great questions. Anyone
Yeah.
else? All right.
What a
Going
delight
once,
to
going
meet you all.
twice. Well, I think that's all then. And
Can
oh,
I
Yeah,
invite,
amazing.
can I,
Amazing time, talk. Thank you and discussion.
thank you. If I can invite everybody to just, if you're not connected on LinkedIn yet, to please do so. I'm also on Instagram at juliakirst.international. And then I would love, if you're interested in the newsletter, and I saw that Chiara just signed up, right, for the weekly newsletter. I say it's the only newsletter in the market, I think, that is dedicated to nurturing your cross-cultural intelligence. And it comes out usually on Fridays. I would love to have you sign up for that as well. You can do that on my website.
all
Thank
right.
you, Cheryl.
Thank you as well. And I think that brings us to the end. And I'd like to thank everyone for attending. And of course, a huge thanks to Julia for your time and your expertise and all of your inspiring comments and useful tips for us, maybe potentially aspiring authors in the future. So,
And I'm available if anybody wants to know more about the practicalities of it. Just send me a note. It's contact@Julia Kirst. Thank you
okay.
so much for this opportunity. I really enjoyed speaking with you.
Thank you as well, and hope to see you soon at a future event. And all the best for continued success in promoting your book around the world. And good luck with your stay in Brazil. And hope to see everyone at an event really soon.
And happy travels to you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julia.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Thanks for
Bye.
a great time.